theater's marquee to write out my check, which I planned to put in Camelot's night drop slot. Involved in my work, I never heard them approach. There was a knock on my driver's side window. Two young boys, somewhere between 9 to 12 years old and dressed in hooded pullovers, stood outside. I cracked the window a bit, anticipating a spiel for money, but I was immediately gripped by an incomprehensible, soul-racking fear. I had no idea why. A conversation ensued between one boy, a somewhat suave, olive-skinned, curly-headed young man, and myself. The other, a red-headed, pale-skinned, freckled young man, stayed in the background. The spokesman, as I've come to think of him, told me that he and his companion needed a ride. They wanted to see a movie. It was Mortal Kombat. But they had left their money at their mother's house. Could I give them a ride, they asked. Plausible enough. But all throughout this exchange, the irrational fear continued and grew. I had no reason to be frightened of these two boys, but I was. Terribly. After a bit more conversation, I looked up at the theater marquee and down at the digital clock display in my car. Mortal Kombat's last show of the night had already started. By the time I could have driven the boys anywhere and back, it would practically have been over. All the while, the spokesperson uttered assurances. It wouldn't take long. They were just two kids. They didn't have a gun or anything. The last part was a bit unnerving. I noticed that my hand had strayed toward the lock on my door. I pulled it away, perhaps a bit too violently. In the short time I had broken the gaze of the spokesperson, something had changed and my mind exploded in a vortex of all-consuming terror. Both boys stared at me with coal black eyes, the sort of eyes one sees these days on aliens or bargain basement vampires on late-night television. Soulless orbs like two great swaths of starless night. I did what I feel any irrational person would do. I full-on freaked out inside while trying to appear completely sane and calm. I apologized to the kids. I made whatever excuses came to mind, all of them designed to get me the hell out of there fast. The aura of fear was now palpable, black, hanging thing, almost as if reality itself was warping around me. I wrapped my hand around the gear shift, threw the car into reverse, and began to roll up the window, apologizing all the while. My fear must have been evident. The boy in the back wore a look of confusion. The spokesman banged sharply on the window as I rolled it up. His words were full of anger. Echo in my mind even today. We can't come in unless you tell us it's okay. Let us in. I drove out of the parking lot in blind fear, and I'm surprised I didn't sideswipe a car or two along the way. I stole a quick look in my rearview mirror before peeling out into the night. The boys were gone. Even if they had run, I don't believe there was any place they could have hidden from view that quickly. I write for a lot of reasons. I did it even if I didn't get paid to do so. So I wrote down the story of what had happened, more or less, as a cathartic exercise, and shared it with a small group of friends on an email list. From there it got out. And it got wilder and wider on the internet, and grew and grew and grew. Type my name in Google and you'll find it soon enough. In time there was a term coined for what I'd seen, BEKs, black-eyed kids. I wouldn't have chosen it personally, but it's the acronym the internet knows. I'm pretty easy to track down, and so I still get calls, emails, and inquiries from people all over the world who want to know more about what I saw, what I think they were, and what the encounter means in some cosmic sense. I've been contacted by everyone from Korean television stations planning New Year's Eve shows to regular people who just wanted to talk. More interesting to me has been sporadic but more than occasional contact from people who think they may have seen something similar. Some narratives follow the template of my original encounter, a bit too slavishly, and these are easy to dismiss, but others have a more than subtle ring of the same sort of panic and helplessness that I felt. Similar experiences have been now in places from suburban neighborhoods to your standard dark alleys throughout the country, possibly beyond. Kids like the ones I saw have allegedly been seen wandering through certain 24-hour big box retailers in the middle of the night and banging on the front doors of numerous witnesses. Are all of these accounts true? Unlikely. Are there enough to at least reinforce my belief that I encountered something truly strange? Definitely. Since my story leaked out to the wider internet, I've gone through several phases for a long while. I eagerly answered any and all correspondences about the happening. A few years later, I got tired of answering the same questions over and over again, and I read, but largely didn't reply to inquiries. But with age and distance from the event, curiosity has had a rebirth. So when a television program called Monsters and Mysteries in America gave me a call asking if they would interview me about the long ago night, I said yes. I've never wanted the reporter news to be a venue for the story. It's easy enough to find online, as I said, and call it a weakness or maybe common sense, but I prefer to keep my encounters with the paranormal separate from my award-winning journalism career. But one of the provisions my bosses at the paper made in exchange for me potentially making a fool of myself on TV was for me to tell the story here, and so I have. Do I expect you to believe me blindly? Of course not. I might not believe it myself if I heard such a story from someone else. What did I see? Your guess is literally as good as anyone's. I've had everything from vampires to demons to ghosts to aliens to a somewhat detailed hallucination posited as possibilities. I do feel like I can say this with some authority. This was back in the day when a freaky coal-black contacts weren't widely available to a couple of kids in Abilene, Texas for anything under a small fortune. And there wasn't enough time to even put such things on in the short time I broke the spokesperson gaze if they could afford them. Will I ever know for certain what I saw? Probably not. Do I ever care to see them again? Hell no. As much as I still don't know about what happened that night and why, here's one thing that I do know. It's a gut feeling, but one that rises to a level of almost certainty. If I had given the spokesperson and his friend a ride on that long ago evening, I don't think I would be here to type this now. So that's Brian Bethel's account of the Black-Eyed Children. It's the one that really kind of inspired either people coming forward or all of the false tales that have been created or reported. Well, that was Brian Bethel's account of his experience with the Black-Eyed Children, or what he believed to be Black-Eyed Children, and it comes from a reputable news source there in Abilene, Texas, Abilene Reporter. Now, interestingly enough, there have been a few mockumentaries or kind of stabs at people kind of digging into this a little bit deeper, and one of the ones that I've seen that I thought was actually pretty decent in a B-movie kind of way was Vancouver director's Nick Hagen's horror series Haunted Sunshine Girl. It continues to be a hit on YouTube, and there's more than 10 million video views and 20,000 subscribers to the movie. Black-Eyed Kids, a spin-off of that series, has been in the works for about a year. It takes a character from Sunshine on an adventure as they investigate the origins of the occult legend of the Black-Eyed Kids. The story in the film is fictional, but reports of Black-Eyed Kids getting sightings, especially in and around Portland, are very real, Hagen said. Black-Eyed Kids is an urban legend that's been floating around on the internet for years now. Hagen says, I always thought it was fascinating. It's been a fun legend to play with, said Mercedes Rose, who co-produced the film with Hagen. They're the first film group to do anything with this Black-Eyed Kids legend, said Rose, who also acts in the production. We're super excited for people to see it. It's so creepy. In the film, Sunshine, played by a teen actress who asks that her name be withheld to protect her from online stalkers, has a friend contact her after somebody he knows vanishes. Suspecting that the Black-Eyed Kids myth has something to do with it, Sunshine and others go to Portland to look for video proof. They find a black-eyed kid, but they discover something a lot more evil than they imagined, Hagen said. And they try to get out alive. And that's true. This story kind of starts out kind of quirky and funny, and it's about a teenage girl who hires a film crew to follow her around to make this film. Her mom supports the idea at first, then changes her mind. And then they go on this kind of adventure. They ran into a homeless girl there in Portland. And then things get really bad, like really bad, really quick. And a lot of bad stuff actually happens to these guys in this film. But it's actually pretty decent, and it's kind of hilarious in some ways, and actually a pretty good stint at horror. So give it a look. I mean, a ton of other people have, and you may already know about it, but I thought it was pretty good. Since Portland seems to be some type of black-eyed kid hotspot, I have a story from Portland, Portland Black-Eyed Children, that was posted June 28, 2013 by a guy named Cliff on the website Pararational. So here goes. Man, I came across this news group by accident as I'm moving to Portland in a few months, and I was just doing a little general research about the city. I was stunned to read about the incidents with the creepy black-eyed kids because I had a similar incident happen to me while visiting Portland in August of 2000. My girlfriend and I were staying at the hostel on Gleason Avenue in northwest Portland. It's a very nice place and a hip and fun, if a little yuppie-ish section of town. Anyway, it was a Friday night, actually early Saturday morning, April. My girlfriend and I were up socializing with another couple from England, sharing some laughs and playing some songs. I had my guitar with me. Well, at about 2:30 a.m., we suddenly realized that there was no more beer left, and none of us really felt like calling it a night just yet. Well, April reminded me that I had bought a couple of bottles of Pinot Noir from a little place called the City Market earlier in the day, but they were still in the trunk of her car. So she tossed me the keys, and I ventured out to make the hike to where the car was parked. There's a part of a good luck finding a spot to park policy at the hostel. So we ended up parking a spot off a side street about 4 blocks from the hostel. It's not really a bad area. Nightlife was still winding down, not too far away from the hostel, and I could hear the random noises of revelry off in the distance. But as I walked to the car, I found myself feeling very alone. As I turned down the street to where the car was parked, a misty rain filled the air. Not really drops, but a kind of misty, directionless rain. The streets lit my path and reflected their dim glow in the wet pavement. As I reached the car and slid my keys into the trunk latch, I heard the voice call out, "Hey, mister!" Thinking I was alone and not having seen anyone as I was walking down the street, I was very startled, and I whirled around to be greeted by the face of an adolescent, who gazed at me intently from just a few feet away. I was really unnerved. By reflex, I jumped back and grabbed my chest and said something like, "Jesus, man, you scared the shit out of me." The kid just kept looking at me, undaunted. He appeared to be between the age of 11 and 14, and he wore old jeans and a hooded sweatshirt. His hair was black and his skin was tan. He had a Mediterranean look about him. It was then that I noticed his eyes were all black. My first thought was that he was on LSD, because I know that can dilate your pupils and give that type of appearance, but this kid didn't seem to be on a drug. He seemed to be very calm and confident. It was kind of unnerving to have a kid act like that. He said without looking away, "I'm lost and scared. Do you think you could give me a ride to my mom's house?" But this kid didn't look scared at all. Masked behind those youthful features was the expression of a wolf leering at me. I'm a fit 28-year-old man, and what I felt was real fear. He kept moving closer and closer to me. Quickly I broke eye contact. I was difficult, though, because these eyes were compelling, deep pools of black. They looked ageless in contrast to the young face. They stared at me, reflecting the streetlights. I was like gazing up at a star-sprent sky on a clear day. I backed off up onto the curb and stammered, "No, really, I can't. I have to go. Sorry." I kept looking at the ground because I had the feeling that if I kept looking at his black eyes, I would become trapped like a fly in a spider's web. I heard him say, "Oh, that's okay. Here come my friends." I quickly looked up past him down the road, and I saw another young boy and a girl about a block further down the middle of the street. I didn't have my glasses on, and I would have trouble seeing clearly off that far, but I'll be damned if it didn't look like they were floating towards us, a couple inches off the ground. I turned around to run, and I heard a guttural growling behind me. I ran faster than I ever ran in my life, straight towards the hostel. I kept feeling like they were right there, behind me, clawing at the back of my neck. I will never forget that feeling as long as I live. It was the closest I ever experienced to true terror. When the hospital was in sight, I finally looked back and found myself alone. I kept running through and didn't stop until I was again with my friends. They were all surprised to see me panting, bending over. They asked, "What happened? Where's the wine?" I collapsed on the floor and didn't speak until I regained my composure. Suddenly I felt ashamed that I ran from a group of kids. I never told them what happened. I told them that some thugs tried to start a fight. Obviously. At that point, I no longer felt like socializing. I told my friends I wanted to retire for the evening. So